Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
Folks, I gotta tell you about mailbox movies. Remember the good old days? Back when Netflix would actually deliver physical media to your mailbox? Do you remember those days? I do. I love them. How often do you find yourself reminiscing about those trips to your local video store, sifting through every single collection, discovering a movie treasure that you've never seen before? If niche is your knack, then Mailbox Movies is the DVD delivery service for you. With simple online ordering and speedy DVD delivery right to your front door, Mailbox Movies has unbeatable prices that will give you more screams for your buck. Now remember, okay? Just remember, because you're going to need this. Use the code JerryHorror for 50% off your first month. Take a shot. 50% off? How can you not? Don't settle for less. Get the best in horror delivered to your door. Again, that promo code for 50% off is JerryHorror. Head on over to mailboxmovies.com and start your own terrifying movie marathon today. Stay spooky all year long at Strangelove Parlor, Long Island's exquisite oddities and curiosity parlor in Lindenhurst, New York. They've got some ghastly apparel. Strangelove Parlor supplies an array of goth jewelry, unisex horror-themed gear, Halloween accoutrement, monstrous purses and wallets, spooky pins, patches, and stickers, providing you with the most wonderful and the most strange of treasures. Visit Strangelove Parlor regularly to find the item of your dreams, or perhaps even your nightmares. Grab your ghoul gang and visit today. Strangelove Parlor in Lindenhurst, Long Island, New York. Welcome to The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Each week we take a deep dive into the history of film and filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you find your favorite podcast to stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, this was the first of 3 Dark Horse comic books. However, it failed to light up the box office like The Mask or Timecop. The original tone of this film was more akin to Silence of the Lambs, though as the production progressed, it turned into a run-of-the-mill slasher film. Another victim of the MPAA's wrath, over 10 minutes of gory kills were cut from the final film. The sequel to this film would have gone full-on supernatural, with our Dr. Villain creating an army of the undead. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this.
Classics, modern fights. Jerry guides us through the nights. Horror's history in the lights. Exploring endless chills and heights. George Romero, lost footage and hidden gems. Director's visions, dark diadems behind the scenes. We're taken there. In sinful whispered secrets we share. Sam Raimi. The Offering with Jerry Horror. Stories old and new. Jason Kruger, Bruce Campbell, genre twists that shake your core. Every episode, we craving more. Mostly horror, always genre.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, it's me, your host, Jerry Horror, and this is The Offering. Welcome back, folks. We are in the midst of spooky season, and you know nobody gets it poppin' like us. From the film selections that I make to the overall impressive audio extravaganza that is brought to you by producer Pete and myself. Oh, new theme song alert. Thank you to the boys over at Scariatrics for dropping something like it was hot. It's crazy. I think you guys will like it. If you don't, don't buy the single, I guess. You remember K-Singles? I remember K-Singles. I think there was a reference to me buying a K-Single under duress this season, sick plug. I don't remember what episode it was. I don't care. You go back. You figure it out. Not my problem. You know, I got stuff going on. Decorating the house. You know, it's this is my favorite time of the year because I think that people who love this season are able to just go buck wild for a month. And I appreciate that. I also appreciate you. Hey, don't forget, we got teas on T Public, if you want to go by there, follow me on social media. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't want to be the host who negs you. I'm not going to be like Joe Rogan and I'm going to guilt you into, he'll tell you to buy vitamins. Like, hey, could you go buy those vitamins? Oh, you feel like shit? It's because you didn't buy the vitamins. Jerry's not going to do that. Though you would look a lot hotter in an Offering t-shirt. I mean, I'm just saying, ladies, fellas. So, we got a 5-star review. I can't believe it. This is amazing. We are getting 5-star reviews. Hey, and I've told you folks, if you leave a 5-star review, I will read it on the air. That's just how we do business. First off, let me preface this by saying that this is the longest review that we've ever had for this show, and I appreciate the effort. This comes from Jen Feldman, 5 stars. Appreciating the education, ... More, please. That's what I always like to hear from women. I want to hear more because I hear less all the time. I hear, you know what, Jerry? I could stand to see less of you. But come over tonight anyway, I'm drunk. Jerry Horror, number 1. This is number 1. Jerry Horror has a pleasant voice. I can easily listen to him for an hour. Going in hour 4 or 5 now. Wow, that's a lot of me inside of you. Without getting neurological pain symptoms often triggered from high-pitched women and men who should consider identifying as a woman. I'm something of a woman myself. I never understood what fan films were, nor why anyone would make one until Jerry cleared up this mystery for me. Well, I'm glad I could do that for you. When confused about movie making, I know I can turn to Jerry with my questions to receive a clear and opinionated answer. I really get off on bad movies, especially the kind made by a director, cast, crew, really trying to make a good movie. So do I. I mean, failure really is what entertains me more than anything. I think everybody, because it humanizes people, you like to see people kind of fail, because then, you're like, they're like me, they suck. So she goes on. As most women in my life have gone on. Well, they've gone off. They get off and they leave. She talked about the bad movies. Sorry, folks, I got lost in the sauce. I don't have a lot of women saying such pleasant things to me on a regular basis, so this is very different to me. Thanks to Jerry, I learned all about the making of what I learned is known to many as the worst sequel of all time, Exorcist II. After that David Gordon Green joint, really, was it the worst one you've ever seen? No, I liked that David Gordon Green one. It was good. I really never cared for The Exorcist or any of its fans, nor good reviews about the movie. But now I really want to see The Exorcist 2 to see what people were really upset about. Jerry said people in the one theater hated the movie so much that they insisted upon speaking to the filmmakers after they found out the filmmakers were in the theater. Yeah, they hightailed it out of there. That Exorcist 2, sick plug, if you haven't listened to the Exorcist 2 episode, people damn near rioted. And I don't know what was going on. Maybe they got bad cocaine, maybe they didn't have cocaine, but it was the midst of the 70s, so it is what it is. It's pieces like this of information that make me want to complete and share my own movies. And that's what we try to do here. We try to inspire folks to make their own films. One day I'd like to hear Jerry cover more movie disasters and bad reviews. Any idiot can make people happy. It takes a special person to really upset society, which I do on a frequent basis. In one interview with director Sean Q. King, that was the Screamwalkers episode, sick plug, horror was compared to porn. As a younger Jen, I always had a bigger love for horror and for porn. Wow, that makes 2 of us, Jen. As I've gotten older, both porn and horror is not as interesting as I found them to be in my youth. Porn for the youth? Well, porn's for everybody, Jen. Don't think it's non-inclusionary. We're all freaks, right? I mean, that's what we're into. No, I promised producer Pete I wouldn't digress any further. I'm going to read this review, Porn for the Youth. Sorry, stuck on that. I never called myself a fan before, but after listening to Jerry Horror's interview with Sean Q. King, I've gone from vocal hater to calling myself an actual fan. Sean mentioned that fun should be in filmmaking, which seems to be a detail that most creators have forgotten. I want to have fun making and watching movies. I hope Jerry gives one of the movies I'm in a scathingly bad review one day. One can only dream. Jen Feldman, thank you for that review. You never know what movies I'm going to do. I don't even know what movies I'm going to do. But it would be my pleasure and honor to hopefully one day review one of your bad films that allegedly you've been in. Allegedly. Because bad is a spectrum. You know, people talk about autism, but I'm going to tell you bad is a spectrum. Because we always talk about like, oh, you know, we saw this movie and it was bad. We were watching Tubi movies and all the crap they put on there, and that's just like content and it's bullshit. There's not real filmmaking happening there. And that's kind of the worst thing, is when the filmmaking is so inept that there's no craft. It's just like we've got booms in the shot, and I can't tell anymore because of the rise of cringe culture. I can't tell whether or not these films are made to be bad or if they are bad. I think the best case scenario is when you have stuff like The Room, where they were trying desperately to make something of value and of depth, and it just goes horribly wrong and off the rails. That's what we like. Because so many times in life, we fail. You hear about the success stories. You hear about the Rocky Balboas, but you didn't hear about the 100 other fighters that got their jaw broken and then just ended up working in a kitchen for the rest of their lives, because we don't want to hear those stories. We want to hear about the 1 in a million that got the shot, because that's what gives us hope. That's what feeds us. That's what feeds us. And it makes us want to persevere in life. And unfortunately, you don't get those stories. Jen, I want to thank you. That was a very kind review. I appreciate the 5 stars. It's crazy. I was talking to producer Pete. We were in the car, and I was saying it's kind of like pornography has lost being special. It used to be a big deal. Your Jenna Jamesons, your Kobe Ties, your Chasey Lanes. It used to be a big deal that there was, I guess we talked about like the 90s, early 2000s, kind of porn chic. We were just like, you know, dropping references to things, and porn stars were everywhere. They were on television. They were in films. You know, you look at stuff like Basketball or VIP with Pamela Anderson. Porn kind of had this omnipresence, but it was a big deal. You were a star. It was like the supermodels of that era. And now everybody's on OnlyFans and they're making pornography. It's just not that special anymore, because you've commodified your own sexuality. And if everybody's making porn, then nobody's making porn, if that makes any sense. You know, you go in stuff like Homegrown Video, you go in Private Society, this is pornography. We're talking about pornography. It is what it is. I hope your kids aren't listening to this. If they are, you're a bad parent. What can I tell you? Get over it. We've all had lesser moments in our lives. Did I ever tell you that I saw Faces of Death when I was 7 years old? That's bad parenting, but whatever. If everybody's making porn, it really just isn't that special. And you have people that rise to the ranks, you know, like they rise in Brazzers, or they make their own content and they become big stars. But you can see anybody in a fuck film these days. Like, everybody's got one. You know, I'm in the wild, woolly world of online dating. And so often I see girls that are just on there like, hey, I'm looking for someone to make content with. And I say to myself, I'm like, do you want a relationship too? Or do you want to just make content? Do you want more? I don't know. Because a lot of times dudes will kid themselves and they'll say, oh man, it's going to be so cool. I'm going to make content with this hot chick. And then you realize that porn is not that much fun. If you enjoy it, like, it's just like if you're a content creator and you enjoy making videos or podcasts and that's your thing, or if it's your kink. And look, if you and your partner and that's your kink and you like doing it, God bless, go crazy. I've tried to make content with women. Sometimes it's gone horribly wrong. Consensual always, of course, because I have to make my dick look bigger than it is. So I got to get good shots. I'm like, She's like, well, how do I look? I'm like, it's not about you. I'm like, it's about trying to make my dick, all 3 inches of it, look bigger. It's like trying to hold the camera steady, getting the right shot, angling yourself. By the time you're done with it, you're just a sweaty, frustrated mess. You're not even, you know, I'm like, come. I'm like, this is what, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I'm trying to be the Francis Ford Coppola and Megalopolis all over her tits. I just wanted to say that on air. That's disgusting. This is a really filthy episode. I got a story to tell you. Can I tell you the story? I swear to God, we're going to get to the episode. There's an episode. It's really good. But okay. So I open up my DM box on one of my social media platforms, which shall not be named. We're not endorsing any social media except Truth Social. But no, wherever Donnie is, that's where I'm at. I got to know what he's thinking. So it just, Truth Social sounds like something dirty, doesn't it? It sounds like Truth or Dare kind of a thing. Like you go on there, you'll see dick pics. But it's all JD Vance. He looks like a human penis. I'm sorry. That guy. So getting into it, I open up one of my DMs. This girl's like, we're talking about movies, been listening to the show. I'm like, hey, cool, maybe I'll get to fuck you. I don't know, like best case scenario, right? She's like, do you remember me? And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is it. I'm like, this is it, Jerry. I'm like, you've gone 46 years and you're going to be on social media and this is how you're going to discover that you have a child. That's what I'm thinking. My brain goes right to it. I'm like, I've got a 13-year-old son or daughter and I'm going to have to own up to it and meet this child. I'm so paranoid. I'm so neurotic. That's exactly where my mind is. She goes, we kind of had a date about 13 years ago. And let me tell you, gentle listener, I used to do a lot of drugs. And then what would happen was I'm not really a drinker, but you get a couple of painkillers in me. And the next thing you know, I'm drinking tequila because I don't know any better. So there's like, like when you see a movie and it says like reel missing, scene missing, like, especially like the Grindhouse movies, the Grindhouse movie that Tarantino and Rodriguez did, like there's whole portions of my life where it's like scene missing. I was DJing before I was a failed rapper singer. I was DJing and I was doing pretty good at it. I enjoy DJing. I enjoy making a good playlist. It's a lost art. The mixtape is a lost art. Shout out to mixtapes. So she comes to meet me and she's like, do you remember? And I'm like, I do not remember at all. I'm like, I have no idea who the fuck this girl is. I'm looking. So what I do is I go from the conversation back to the thing and I'm looking at the pictures and I'm like, who the fuck is this? I'm like, she's pretty hot. So, I guess maybe it worked out for old Jerry. She says, I showed up and I had drank way too much. Oh my God. It must have been early in the night before I had too many chemicals in my system. I said to myself, oh my God. So this girl comes up to the DJ booth. I'm in the DJ booth. I'm pretending to do things. I'm like twisting knobs. It's doing nothing, but I'm just to make it look, because let me tell you something. Here's a little secret that Daft Punk will never tell you. They're not doing dick. Occasionally they're mixing and doing some beat matching and queuing up the next piece of music. But for the most part, everything you see is bullshit. They're occasionally fucking with some, things like the bass or the treble. It is what it is, but it's not magic, all right? So let's not pretend you're fucking Doctor Strange up there and you're doing hand signals and magic's happening. Sorry, I exposed the Big DJ. I get murdered next week by Big DJ. So she says to me, hey, I don't want to say her name because that's the thing. Like, I'm not stupid. Like, I'm telling you the story, but I'm not trying to expose this girl in any way. So she's like, hey, what's up? She pukes everywhere. And this poor girl, there's like a difference. There's like, oh, like you had food. This bitch did not have any food. This was just like straight and it smelled fruity. It was very fruity. Holy crap. And I'm talking like projectile vomit. It came shooting out of her mouth. It was like, it was like an exorcism. And luckily it didn't get on me or the mixing board. Thank God. She's like, I gotta go. She's like runs away like Napoleon Dynamite. Look, bye. And I'm just standing there with this big pile of puke next to me. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. So apparently that was how we met. So first off, I said to myself, thank God, didn't have intercourse with her because that didn't happen. She sprayed me. I didn't get to spray her. Whoa. So with that being said, I did remember her and I asked her, I'm like, so how's life been since then? Because I didn't know how to like move to the next thing. She still hasn't responded. She's a listener of the show. And sweetie, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry that I had to expose you, but it's a funny story. And I really wish that we would have smashed because let me tell you something. When you're sitting in that old folks home and you're dying and your dick's falling off, you're not going to be saying to yourself, well, I'm glad I didn't smash with Deborah that night. No, you're kind of like, I really wish I would have slept with more people because I know there's a bunch of old ladies who kept that coochie tight and they were just like, I should have fucked everybody. I should have fucked, and I get it. So I guess what I'm saying is always be careful. Sexually transmitted diseases are a real thing. Pregnancy is a very real thing. Catching feelings, fake. But in all seriousness, make sure if you're having sex, you're making content, that you're doing it responsibly with someone that you sort of care about tangentially, unless it's a business decision. Because if it's a business decision, then you need to get tested and you need to do the right thing, You don't want to be the person who gave everybody herpes. Or maybe you do. Maybe you're an asshole. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. But in all seriousness, folks, we got a great show today. I don't know how you rebound from that. I don't know. But you know what? It's funny because I'm fucking insane. I'm focusing on things way too much, but it's important that we talk about STDs and safe sex and practicing safe sex because today is a medical episode. And there's nothing more scary than medical horror. Medical horror freaks people out. I've never been a gynecologist, but women tell me about going on gynecological exams, and it sounds terrifying. It is like some next level shit. Listen, there's a lot of men out there, and you're like, oh, I do MMA and I lift weights. Yeah, well, I do too, but guess what, dude? I could not be a woman and go to a gynecological appointment. It sounds terrifying. I've seen some of the tools that they use, and quite frankly, it's disturbing. And maybe that was the line of work I should have pursued rather than becoming a podcaster. So, with that being said, you're going to get your PhD today because we're doing, I can't say it. Sorry. If you want to finish, you're going to wait till after the break. Stay tuned. Larry Drake, who you probably remember as the slow man from LA Law, he won 2 Primetime Emmys for that show. Most famously, he was in Sam Raimi's Darkman, which is one of my favorite movies. He was the bad guy in that, and he was great. He was just absolutely great in that movie. He's blowing up, obviously, on television, and somebody says, hey, we should make a horror picture with this guy. He was so good in Darkman. But we'll get there. Let's do some table setting first. Wouldn't you know it, and we talked about with The Mummy, Van Helsing, double sick plug. Go listen to those episodes. Well, here we are in 1991, and Universal says, we got to get these monsters going again. I feel like it's like in the early seasons, it was all about the Weinsteins, and now it's just become all about Universal's dreams of resurrecting these monsters. But somebody had a different idea, and they said, why don't we create new monsters? We'll create our own new universe. What had happened was MGM was in a bunch of financial trouble. So they sold off the sequel rights to Universal for the Child's Play films, and that's how Child's Play 2 came about. We also did that sick plug. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous. It's like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia as Charlie's got the strings, like everything is starting to really connect now. Like we have our own universe, we have our own deep lore. They released Child's Play 2, it makes a ton of money, and they're like, we need to get some other horror icons. This was a big deal. They're trying to figure out, how do we do this? Now, this is where it gets a little bit crazy because half of the Universal team, this is all the people who handle the genre stuff, the direct-to-video stuff. Some of them are like, we need to create new monsters. We've got Chucky. Chucky's a solid start. We can do Chucky versus whatever, but we don't have anybody else yet. Early in 1991, John Carpenter was approached to remake The Creature from the Black Lagoon, with Rick Baker creating designs for the new look of the creature. However, it was canceled due to the failure of Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which was the same year. Now, that's the one with Chevy Chase, and it's not a good movie, but the effects are fantastic. Sam Neill's a great bad guy. He gives it 100%. One thing I will say about Sam Neill, even if you watch Possession and stuff, even Omen 3, when he dedicates himself to a genre piece, he goes all in. He's a real actor. He later teams up with Carpenter. Again, they do in The Mouth of Madness, which is a great movie. That's an underrated one. If you haven't seen it, definitely check that one out. But they were like, well, nobody's going to have interest in this because, The Invisible Man failed. I think back to myself and I'm like, oh my God, what I would have given for a John Carpenter directed, Rick Baker creature designed Creature from the Black Lagoon. How cool would that have been? Well, the team, the other half, at least one half of the team at Universal in the genre department was like, well, we're just going to do new monsters because I don't think people want to see these old monsters. Even every year, though, there's like a whole very vocal group of people that are like, please bring back the monsters. I think we're stuck in this cycle where we're just going to do this until the end of our days, where it's like they're going to try to do it. We've talked about it before. In January of 2025, they've got the Leigh Whannell Wolfman movie coming out. He also did The Invisible Man. That was a great remake, reimagining. I really dug it. They just didn't know what they were going to do. Because as we talked about in the Shocker episode, that was another one of those movies that they were trying. That was like 89, and Shocker didn't take off. So this was kind of this weird period in Universal. I want to say it's like 87, 88 up until like 1995, where they're trying to create new characters. They're trying to create new franchises. And Chucky, obviously, because it's such a great character and there's a story with Andy Barclay and people are emotionally invested, Chucky works and it survived. Recently, it was canceled, season 3. You know, that sucks. With everything going on, it's always bad when people's shows get canceled. You know, I feel bad. You know, like people don't understand, like that's how people put food on the table. That's how they support their family. There's a sound crew, there's gaffers, there's union, there's all kinds of people working on this. So whenever something gets canceled, it's always sad because somebody's missing out on a paycheck, you know, and that's never a good thing. Enter Dark Horse Comics. I was a big fan of Dark Horse. My dad early on collected the Terminator and he collected the Aliens comic books. We used to go to the comic book store. It was great. And they really expanded these universes in ways that they try to in other mediums. I love comic books because they're so flexible. It's such a malleable genre that you can do different things with source material, especially movies, like Producer Pete did with Deathgasm. Sick plug. Are you ready for that? Ooh, damn, goddamn, these plugs are getting so sick. I'm going to puke. So Dark Horse has a bunch of original stuff. You know, they had Concrete. I love the character Concrete. He's just this big hulking monster, but he's gentle. He's kind of like the Thing. They start, you know, doing stuff with Hellboy. They're doing all these different imprints and original characters. So on August 11th, 1992, Variety reports that Largo Entertainment signed on an exclusive first-look deal with Dark Horse Comics to develop and produce films based on their franchises. What happens is Dr. Giggles becomes the test pilot, the space monkey, to be placed in the rocket to venture off to Mars.
Forget the textbooks, the diagrams, the cadavers. This is the real thing. Scalpel. Bigger scalpel. Better. Clean cut through the dermal. Suction. Easy now. The tractor. And cauterize. Just nudge these intestines over to the right. Bone cutter.
Uh-oh. This fall,
Nicked a bit of the liver there.
the doctor is out
Hello, Mr. Pancreas.
of his mind.
It only hurts when I laugh.
What's happening?
Jennifer?
You are dead.
Don't worry, it's just a routine operation.
Dr. Giggles.
The doctor will see you now.
Some of the origins are a little bit dubious of how this character came to be, but it was Graham Whiffler, whose initial script, which was known under the title as Mr. Giggles. And now when they were developing Mr. Giggles, it was a completely different animal and didn't really lend itself necessarily to what the film became. Now, according to Whiffler, due to the producer's strong desire for a horror franchise, numerous changes had to be made. So Whiffler's writing this movie, and he keeps turning in these scripts. And they're like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of like Silence of the Lambs. It's really dark. It's really dour. So they keep kicking back to Graham Whiffler and saying, like, all right, you need to change the script. We need to do some things. And then somebody, because this is, again, we talk about synergy, we talk about serendipity, someone says, well, he's a doctor, right? So why don't we just call it Dr. Giggles and we'll just make it a slasher movie? And Whiffler's like, at this point, he had rewritten the script like 6 times, and he was like, yeah, sure. So he just turns it in, and he kept telling them, he's like, this is not the way we should go with this, because I think we could have a real movie here that could be on the caliber of Silence of the Lambs. And they were just like, no, we need someone to fight Chucky. And he was like, who the hell's Chucky? He's like, the killer doll. What? Like, this is insane. He's like, this is a deep psychological thriller about a doctor who loses his mind and starts operating, going rogue and just goes crazy. And they said, nah, that's not going to work for us. We need something that's, a little more tangible, something that'll sell to the teens, the kids who get high before they go into the theaters. What's crazy is, and I'm going to do a little bit of a time jump here, Whiffler would revisit the original script, which was Mr. Giggles, and he adapted it himself. He would be the writer and director of a movie called Neighborhood Watch in 2005, and that was kind of a mutation, an offshoot of what the original movie was. I've seen bits and pieces of it. It's nothing to write home about, but it's kind of the same thing. It's a psychological thriller. It's more grounded in reality. Really, really nothing to write home about. But Universal really liked Larry Drake because the Dark Man turn. They were like, oh my God, he was so good as Duran. We should bring him back. So we're getting to that point where Paramount has the Puppet Master films via Full Moon. And they say, well, we can't get Sam Raimi back, and we definitely can't get Liam Neeson. I mean, he's getting ready to do like Schindler's List and stuff like that. But we can do a direct-to-video sequel. And they did Darkman 2, The Revenge of Duran, and Larry Drake came back and reprised his role, even though he got his head cut off. But we're getting weird. And also on this same subject, Marvel had a Darkman comic book that I loved. The Darkman comic book was fabulous. It was really well written. If you think about it, if you look at the bandages and you look at everything, Darkman's kind of like a universal monster himself. He changes faces. He's the man of 1,000 faces. So the Darkman sequel did good enough that they were like, wow, like Larry Drake could probably, he's just won 2 Emmys. He could probably carry his own picture. I don't see why not. So they decide to plug him in and they say, listen, how would you like to lead this movie? It's a deal between Dark Horse and Universal Pictures. And this is interesting too, because this deal is with JVC, and JVC is technically a Japanese company. There's been a myriad of rights issues with this film, and it goes back to that JVC and Largo Entertainment, like there's all these rights issues. So when they finally did do a Blu-ray of this, it's been hard to distribute this film because there's like 10 different people and corporate entities that are making money off of Dr. Giggles, which makes it like a rights nightmare. So there's a lot of times that like you don't see it on cable, you don't see it because so many people need to get paid for this movie to be circulated, which to me is insane. Can I just say this too? Bad Company singer. I like Bad Company. They're like a crappy band that your dad likes. Singer Paul Rogers covered the song Bad Case of Lovin' You for the soundtrack, which is how they use that at the end of the movie. It's actually a pretty good tune because you're like, oh, bad case of loving you. But I kept saying to myself, what the hell does this have to do with Dr. Giggles? You could have done something like, Alvin and the Chipmunks, I called the witch doctor, and dun, 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 dun. That would have been cooler. I don't know. It's a doctor. How many songs are about doctor? I don't know. There's not a lot of songs about doctor to tie into the movie. Dr. Giggles would be the first film distributed by Universal Pictures through its distribution deal with Largo. Universal would handle the domestic distribution and release the film in all territories except for Japan and Italy, where that would be released by the Victor Company, which was a subsidiary of, I know you guys come to the show for subsidiaries of JVC. It was the Victor Company of Japan Limited and Penta Films, respectively. So that's another problem with this movie. Dark Horse has stake in it. JVC has stake in it, and Universal is the American distributor. It's just, the rights for this movie are a nightmare. They said early on, they're like, hey, listen, we're not going to give you a lot of money for this movie. And Manny Cotto, who wrote and directed this film, he really didn't do, he did some TV, did some other stuff, but he's not like a prolific director. He's no John Carpenter, obviously. But he was passionate about this movie. So what happens is they decide, all right, this is going to be a big Halloween release for Universal, in 92. And they said, all right, we're going to pump a couple of more bucks into it. Nothing crazy, a couple of $100,000 more. They really don't, look, here's the thing, and I'm sorry, all right? Here's the thing with Jerry. This movie sucks. I would love to candy coat this, but there is a myriad of reasons why this film doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you why it doesn't work. Because in the early 90s, this was the hangover of the slasher genre. We had gotten so many excellent movies like the Friday the 13th series. And at this point, you had Leatherface, who was over at New Line Cinema. Jason was over at New Line Cinema. And people were still trying to use that 80s playbook, and it just doesn't work. And this film is very much proof positive of tastes were changing, because we kick into the 90s, we're doing psychological thrillers. That's kind of the flavor at the time. And it's not until 1996 when Wes Craven says, oh no, wait, we can take the slasher film and turn it on its ear. Because at this point, we're killing off Freddy Krueger. 93, they would do Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. And we're killing off the 80s. And I've said this before, a lot of those slasher films never should have survived the 80s. They should have just been in that little time capsule. By the time 89 rolled around, you had Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, which I've gone on, I love the movie now. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is I don't like it. And I think people had that similar feeling for Jason Takes Manhattan. So when you have a movie like Dr. Giggles in 1992, you do have the built-in audience of horror nerds like myself that were like, we were primed. Because the thing is, kids who are a little bit younger, they're being exposed to these movies via VHS. They're being exposed to them on cable. At this point, I'm a freshman in high school, and I'm like the perfect target audience just coming out of middle school. I love horror movies. If you were reading comic books like I was reading comic books, man, I still love comic books. They're great. It's just such a wonderful medium of art. It's the intersection of, you can be more risky. There's things that you wouldn't be able to do in a Darkman movie, but you can totally go there with a comic book. And if you remember, like I remember, Dr. Giggles, full page ad. Okay, and I will say this, I'm going to give Dr. Giggles its due. This is one of the greatest posters. It's just him, Larry Drake's eyes with the mask over his face because he knows COVID's coming. Whoa, Dr. Giggles predicted COVID? Oh my God. No, The Simpsons did. No, they didn't. Well, they kind of did. Actually, they did. Never mind. But aside from that, it's the greatest one sheet for a movie. Because when you think of something that you would hang on your wall that is absolutely audacious, that your mom would hate, your mom hates the Dr. Giggles poster. And it's got this really cool font, and the font is all like surgical instruments, and they're just a little bit dabbed in blood, and his menacing eyes. The promise of that poster had me hook, line, and sinker. There was no way. That little dumb Jerry, little dumb fat kid in his little fat kid shorts, he was going to grab his popcorn and his best friend, Dr. Pepper, another noted doctor, and we would head to the movies, and oh boy, this is going to be the greatest movie ever, for a year, because of the connection to Dark Horse comic books. And don't forget, I'm reading Dark Horse, and the comic book industry is a bit incestuous. Universal kind of had a connection with Marvel because they had licensed out a bunch of characters like, Darkman and stuff to Marvel to make comic books. You had to see, it was literally a year, that poster, the Dr. Giggles poster. So I was reading like Aliens vs. Predator. I'm reading Darkman, and I'm just like, wow. I'm like, this movie's coming out, and it's going to be rad. I was so excited for Dr. Giggles. I went to the comic book store one day, and back in the 90s, a big thing was the 11 by 17 posters. And they used to give them out, and it was a big deal. Early 90s, I had the Army of Darkness poster on my wall. That was an amazing one. And they gave me a Dr. Giggles poster. And I was overjoyed. I was like, can I take two? Because just in case I was going to be a dumb little fat kid on my bike home and destroy one of them, I needed a backup. And he was like, Jerry, nobody gives a shit about this movie. You can take 4. I was like, wow. It's like, holy smokes, Mr. Comic Book Guy, you're the best. And I think because of this weird permutation of the whole comic book craze in the early 90s, that this movie had been marketed directly to idiots like me, it does hold a fond place in my heart. Child's Play 2 was another one. I remember that was another 11x17 poster that I hung on the wall. You know, sorry, Jack, Chucky's back. He's cutting the head off. I love this stuff. And to me, it felt like, wow, like Universal's really trying to do something here, especially with Army of Darkness. And they were. You could even argue that because they renamed, it was not an Evil Dead movie. It was Ash versus the Army of Darkness. And then it became just the Army of Darkness because they're like, who the hell knows what Evil Dead is? A lot of us know what Evil Dead was, even in the 80s, because there's some of the greatest genre movies of all time. Army of Darkness was another film within that cycle. That's like 92, 93, where they're like, oh, we're going to get Ash. So I think the overall plan was like, we're going to have Dr. Giggles, we're going to have the Evil Dead, we're going to have Chucky, and it's all going to be under the same banner, and it's going to be a complete monster mash. But what happens is they put out Child's Play 3, and Child's Play 3 is not a very good movie. It's fun to watch now because it's an early 90s Universal horror movie, and it's goofy, and we go to military school, they age up Andy Barclay. It doesn't work, and it doesn't do as well at the box office. And again, Child's Play was something that started in the 80s, and here we are in the 90s, and it's just like, there's a bunch of movies that they tried to get rolling, especially in the 90s. I don't know what it was, but none of them really take. Dr. Giggles is one of those movies from that era that just, for whatever reason, really didn't connect with its target audience.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
Woo, spicy! The Killer Cook Barbecue Sauce and Dry Rub Company was founded on the basis of bringing global flavors to the American palate. Handcrafted barbecue sauces made from nostalgic sodas, based out of Port Jefferson, New York, Killer Cook will bring the unexpected out of the familiar in food, creating exciting flavor combinations, resulting in food that is so delicious, it's deadly. I'm reading some reviews now on their website. Here's a few that caught my eye. My man's brisket is amazing, but the rub, wow. That's the Killer Cook's Lower East Side brisket rub getting a 5-star review. Here's another one. Brought this in from my brother who loves to cook. He's also a big Mortal Kombat fan. I know he's going to find it as funny as I did, and the flavor sounds right up his alley as well. Another 5-star review from the Chow Chan Rub, the biggest, baddest flavor boss of all the realms. And finally, here's the 5-star review for the Killer Cook's Passport to Flavor gift set. Absolutely love the product. Joy is very pleasant to work with. The product is beautifully packaged. Couldn't have asked for better service. Guys, globally inspired dry rub collection, chef crafted in small batches. Salts, sugars, seasonings, barbecue sauce, and soda shop. All killer folks, no filler. Visit thekillercook.com to spice up your basic bitch barbecue. Knows Best Candles is a soy wax candle company owned by 2 Long Island natives turned Manhattanites. They hand pour small batches of cheeky candles that inspire the euphoric feeling of synesthesia. They've got diffusers, room sprays, bundles, and gift cards are always available as well. Each Knows Best candle pairs an enchanting dual fragrance with a curated Spotify playlist to help set your mood at home. Not to mention, the names of the candles are a conversation starter themselves. Bestsellers include Safe Word, Midday Nap, and my personal favorite, Bitch Goddess. The perfect scents to burn while listening to your favorite podcast. That's right, The Offering. Remember to use promo code JerryHorror20 to automatically save 20% off your order. Stop paying for overpriced basic bitch candles. Spoil yourself or your loved ones with Knows Best candles. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. Got a question or story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhorror. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at jerryhorror. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. So with the impetus of Universal thinking to themselves that this needs to be the next big horror franchise, people within the company are very excited. Because with this film, we've got Larry Drake. Again, he just won 2 Primetime Emmys for LA Law. People are saying to themselves, hey, wait a second, this is different because we've got a guy, and I think everybody was trying to ape the success of Silence of the Lambs. They're like, this could be our Hannibal Lecter. The problem with Hannibal Lecter is, which did become a franchise, there were TV shows and many sequels, which, I mean, let's be honest, there never should have been. Manhunter's great, Silence of the Lambs is great, Red Dragon's pretty good, I enjoy Red Dragon, but Hannibal's terrible. And they tried to franchise that, and it's to mixed results, okay? Let's be honest. But they thought with Dr. Giggles, hey man, we can really turn this into a big thing. So Manny Cotto, writer-director, goes back to them and says, look, you guys want another Freddy Krueger. Well, here's the difference. This is an Emmy-winning actor that made you guys a ton of money with Darkman. He was a great villain. So he says, listen, we need more money to make this movie. So he goes back and he says, give us $7.5 million to do it. And they were like kind of hesitant, like, oh man, you really don't have a lot of people. The actor from Roseanne who played Mark is in this movie. Unfortunately, years later, he would pass away, but he's probably the best part of this movie, and he's hardly in it. Dougie Doug is in the movie. We tried, producer Pete was saying before, we tried to make Dougie Doug a thing. Most of the actors in this movie are unknowns. And one of the big problems with this movie is that it's a real movie. And I want to say, and this is being lenient, this movie takes almost, like you have a really great opening scene that works, but this movie takes almost an hour to get going. Part of the problem is that it's a real movie. It's not, you see, okay, when we talk about slasher films, there is a rhythmic pace to a slasher film. I think it's even broken down by Joe Bob Briggs, is that you need a kill every 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes, you need to see tits, you need to see gore, because if you don't, the young audience, like little fat kid me that was seeing this movie, you're going to lose them. This is the problem. They spend all this money. And I will say this movie, gorgeously shot. It's a well-shot movie. It's a beautiful movie. But it's completely imbalanced. And the parts of that script that were Mr. Giggles, you can feel them. It's almost like there's another movie that is trying to emerge from this one, but never quite is able to, because at the end of the day, we have to make a slasher movie. Universal was like, listen, the only way we're going to do this is if we add a ton of gore into this movie. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it. I will say Dr. Giggles had like $2 million just for special effects, which for prosthetic makeup was a lot of money back then. And they said, all right, we're going to up it. We're just going to do as much as we can. There's even stuff with the movie like the Dr. Mario thing. There's this whole sequence where there's a little kid and he's playing Dr. Mario, and they thought that that was going to be cool synergy. They were desperately trying. You have this group of teenagers and they're like, let's get stoned and go to Dr. Giggles' house, because that's what you do. So there's this whole initial sequence where they go to Dr. Giggles' house and then the cops show up. So I'm like, all right, boner kill, because I'm assuming at that point, 45 fucking minutes into this movie, that we're going to start like, okay, they're going to go to the house. Dr. Giggles is going to be there. That's the house on the poster. Let's get it going. And I will say that the film really has some sick and twisted elements. Like Dr. Giggle's dad is an evil doctor, and that's kind of where he learns the whole practice or whatever. There's a scene where his father tries to hide him because the police are coming. So he sews him up into a dead woman. And most of this got cut because it was just so repugnant. If you read the comic book adaptation, that was in there. And I will tell you, they're not terribly expensive, but if you can go back and you can get the Dark Horse comic book series that was an adaptation of this, it's actually better. Because what happened was the series came out in the summer, and I think 2 issues were out before the movie came out. And of course, because I'm a dumb little fat kid, I'm reading the book, and I'm like, wow, Doc, this is so fucked up. Like, he gets sewed up into this dead woman, and he's killing people, and he's making these mutant creatures because he's sick, demented. He's a mad scientist, right? For argument's sake, there's another movie called Dr. Butcher, MD, and that's not very good. It was like a low-budget movie shot in the Philippines. Can I recommend Dr. Butcher? It's a soft recommend. At least that movie had like a ton of gore, a ton of nudity, and it works. There's even like a sex scene in this movie. And there's a whole thing, hey, are you going to use protection? That was kind of new. We didn't see that in the slasher movies of the 80s. Everybody's just doing drugs and having unprotected sex. And nobody gives a shit. And the character finds out that there's a hole in the condom. And he's like, she won't know. And I'm like, oh, dude, you're dead. So we were able to use some of those tropes in this movie. Even our lead heroine, she's got this weird heart disease, and Dr. Giggles is after her, and she has to wear this pump. And I will say, though, there's a really funny scene where she hears her dad fucking the new stepmom, and it is pretty egregious. Like, he's like, call me the king, baby, call me the king. And she's like, oh, you're the king, baby, you're the... And I'm like, who said... What's happening? So I will say the sex scene between the parents, which is off screen, whatever. Holly Marie Combs, she did Charmed, and Charmed was a huge show. You had Rose McGowan, you had Shannon Doherty, a lot of beautiful women. Why wasn't I watching Charmed? And Glenn Quinn, who played Mark on Roseanne. The guy had a real problem with drugs and mental illness, and it really just a shame because he was a good actor. I always liked him. He brought a lot of kind of edge and gravitas to Roseanne. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, Jerry, you guys cover a lot of troubled productions on The Offering. Oh boy, do we ever. So, wouldn't you know, this is where we hit the bump in the road. And this is why, for me personally, Dr. Giggles doesn't work. They submit this film to the MPAA, right? And the film initially had 3 sex scenes, and it had tons of gore because they spent over $2 million on the prosthetic effects. The MPAA, don't forget, we're still in, George Bush's presidency. The United States became very conservative in the early 90s, like right before old Bill. Yeah, before I got into office and I was taking pulls off that shit, it was Bush. That's what I said. No, before Clinton took office, we were kind of in this weird thing where it was like the Bush administration was very much like, this is a return to traditional family values. We had just come off the Reagan presidency. The economy was starting to look like shit. We were entering another, we're doing Desert Storm. We're entering different wars and interfering where we shouldn't be. The reality of the situation is that the MPAA had enough. Jack Valenti, especially at that time. It's like we had the Friday the 13th, we had the Nightmare on Elm Streets, and everybody else who tried to make a buck off of the slasher craze. They submitted this movie, check this out, 16 times, which might be an Offering record. The 3 sex scenes were cut. They're trimmed to shit. You don't see anything. I don't even think you see a pair of boobs in this movie. So that's a net loss for everybody involved. The other thing, too, is most of these kills are off screen. You don't get to see, and they created all this great stuff because if you look at the Shout Factory, who did a great job on their Blu-ray, hey, Shout Factory, aka Scream Factory, we're The Offering. I'm Jerry Horror. Maybe you should sponsor us. Just saying, I can't afford to buy all these DVDs all the time, and it would really help us out. I think there's a cross-section of our listeners that probably collect your physical media. So if anybody out there knows the people at Scream or Shout Factory, tell them to holler at Producer Pete, and we'll work something out. Maybe you give us some Blu-rays. Maybe we give you an ad. Maybe we, I don't know. So this movie is cut to shit. A lot of times, Producer Pete, we've got it on in the background. There's the thing with the thermometer. And he puts the sharp thermometer in the girl's mouth, and you see a little bit of a speckle of blood. All of that stuff got cut down. The original effect, he goes in and pulls her tongue out, and it's really gruesome. And that stuff, again, go back and read the comic books. It survives in the comic books, but the movies, it's just cut down to nothing. Initially, this movie had a very dark ending, and Universal didn't like that. Now, of course, Universal wanted a sequel, which they do leave the door open for the sequel, but the ending had to be changed, because in the original ending of Dr. Giggles, he wins. He kills everybody, and it's done. At least here, you've got a final girl, kind of a final boy, and we leave the door open. But Universal was like, all right, you got to change this ending. But Manny Cotto, writer-director, was like, if you change the ending, you fundamentally destroy what this film is. A lot of the time in this movie is spent looking, okay, we've got the carnival, that's one set piece. We've got the kids going to a house party, that's another set piece. And then obviously the evil house of Dr. Giggles. I gotta tell you, man, the problem with this movie is we are just fucking around. And with no nudity and damn near no gore, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to fap? I can't fap if all this is going on. So I will say, if the true villain of this story, in whole, if I could be so courageous, is the MPAA. They destroyed this movie. I remember, again, going to the movies. Listen, I was a classic overseller. Because if I chose a movie, I was like, oh no, it's going to be rad, guys. So I would get all my friends, and I would be so excited that I would convert my friends like a cult leader. I'd be like, we gotta see Dr. Giggles. Dr. Giggles is gonna change our lives. It's gonna be the movie that... And we saw it, and it was another, Jerry, you're not allowed to pick the movie. Fuck. Because not only was I not impressed with Dr. Giggles, my friends now were all like, oh, you suck, man. Like, you picked another shitty movie. I will also say shout out to Mike Rocco and Mike McAndrew when they made the mistake of letting Jerry pick the movie once again. And I said, come on, guys, we got to go see Leprechaun 2. Let me tell you something. I lost more than I gained, because everybody usually got to pick a movie. That's my peer group. That's kind of how it worked. Pete would get to pick the movie. Sean would pick the movie. I picked so many stinkers that I was picking 1 or 2 movies a year, because people were like, everything Jerry makes us go see is terrible. And you know what? That's why I got a fucking podcast, so I can bitch about it. So I can tell you guys, no, the movies weren't, well, the movie was terrible, but all right, I digress. So, you ready for the sad and tragic ending of Dr. Giggles? Well, this is really the part that hurts more than anything that occurs in the movie. The film reportedly cost $7.4 million, and it made $8 million total. Now, allegedly, they spent about $8 million marketing the film. And so they were like $16 million in the hole. They made half back. And at the end of the day, what kills off Dr. Giggles is that you got to pay JVC, you got to pay Dark Horse, and you got to pay Universal. So with that three-way split, nobody's really making money. The original release was on October 23rd, 1992. I'm going to tell you, man, this movie was pretty dead on arrival. What sucked was Manny Cotto really wanted to do more of these. Luckily, he was able to bring back Dr. Giggles. Like, Dark Horse used to do a couple of anthology comic books, and Dr. Giggles would pop up. And I'm going to tell you guys, if you go back and you read those comics, it's totally rad. Go back, read the Dark Horse comics, and you can see what the promise of what this film was. Most importantly, this movie is a franchise non-starter. Dr. Giggles was destined. We were going to get Dr. Giggles 2. He goes to med school. Dr. Giggles 3. He's teaching online courses or something. But they really did. It's one of those things where they thought this was going to be a big thing and that it was, people are going to dress up like Dr. Giggles. There was, in fact, Dr. Giggles' costume, which has got to be the laziest costume of all time. It was essentially, and this is one of the, aside from the comic, this is one of the only pieces of merchandise that was ever made for the movie. It was Dr. Scrubs, and they just threw some fake blood on it. That's it. That's your Dr. Giggles costume. But yes, it didn't sell. No one gave a shit. No one was Dr. Giggles for Halloween. I'm sure there was one guy. He probably didn't get laid, but you know, it is because he showed up to the party and he was like, hey, look, I'm Dr. Giggles. And like, who? He's like, never mind. I'm going to go get some punch. So this is where it gets crazy. There was a plan for a sequel. I got to tell you, folks, we fucked up because this sequel sounds better than the movie itself. And I'm going to tell you why. In the movie, Dr. Giggles was going to be dead. He was going to be pronounced dead. And he comes back to life. I don't know. I mean, I haven't read the script. I don't know how that happens. But Dr. Giggles comes back from the dead. And he's horribly disfigured now, even more so than ever. And he wants to get revenge on the town because he feels that, oh, this is the town. So now we've got kind of a Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger, going after the kids. He wants to get revenge on this entire town, so he creates an army of the undead. And he starts using like voodoo and all this weird shit to bring the dead back. And there's zombies. And it is off the wall. There was concept art of Larry Drake running around with a chainsaw. And I'm like, damn, why didn't we get this movie? This movie sounds awesome. So Dr. Giggles 2, Malpractice Lawsuit. No, that would have been a great title, though. Because that's a good title, Dr. Giggles 2, Malpractice. I would have seen that. It just didn't. One thing that was nice was, Larry Drake did pass away, unfortunately. And recently Manny Cotto passed away. December 12th in 2009, the New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles had a revival screening with a restored print. And by all accounts, it's still a shitty movie. So, were you curious about the critical response to this film? Oh, boy, was I. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes, Dr. Giggles holds an approval rating of 23% based on 31 critical reviews and an average rating of 3.7 out of 10. Its consensus reads, Larry Drake's deranged performance as the titular doctor is just about all that distinguishes Dr. Giggles from its slasher brethren. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of C+, on an A+ to an F scale. Variety, which this was the other thing, Variety ran an early review. This was another one where they didn't show it to critics. A wildly uneven horror film, and said that most of the film focuses too much on cheap laughs. And that's the problem. Dr. Giggles is more goofy than scary, and you could consider this movie more of a comedy. It's like a horror comedy, but here's the thing. When you do the horror comedy, like Shaun of the Dead, perfect example, you still have to get gruesome. And the problem with this movie is that it never gets to dial up the violence. And again, it's a competent movie, it's well shot, it's well constructed, but it just doesn't have teeth. And most of the time, we're not left with the rhythmic kills, we're just left fucking around, and that's not good. Vincent Canby, from the New York Times, he was one of the only big guys to review it. The screenplay is stitched together from variations on cliches used by or about the medical community. The Washington Post wrote, Manny Cotto turns to co-writer Graham Whiffler time and time again for punchlines in a desperate attempt to revive a script that begins in critical condition and ends up DOA. Come on, man. Dude, I'm like flustered. Dr. Giggles 3, DOA. Dr. Giggles 4, critical condition. Come on, man. Those are some dude, we could have, you know what? I'll bet you if we had the money, we could have made a bunch of sequels direct to video. Sight and Sound, which I love Sight and Sound, wrote, the film's satire gives way to a few nicely nasty moments, but the film never tops the visual flair of the opening credits. And again, producer Pete and I were talking about that. You start out and it's like, it's early 90s CGI. They probably spent $1 million to do this thing. And it's going through the heart and the blood vessels, and the shot pans up and we see all the people watching Dr. Giggles, and there's some gore and they're chasing him out of the hospital. That's the movie we wanted. We didn't want 90 minutes. And let me tell you something, this thing clocks in at like 88 minutes. I'm telling you, had it been 1 minute longer, the movie would have just completely fallen apart. Because even now, as we're watching the film, We're going back to the dopey slasher tropes. It's nothing you haven't seen before. The most important part of this film is that I'm realizing that Holly Marie Combs did not wear a bra. And that's probably the best thing this film's got going for it. Now, everybody knows Roger Ebert's my hero, along with Joe Bob Briggs, and to a lesser extent, Bob Guccione, who owned Penthouse. But I digress. Roger Ebert did not do a review of Dr. Giggles. I was very upset because he probably would have said something funny. The one big cultural touchstone was, there's a joke in Seinfeld where they go see a movie, and I forget what the name of it is, but it's Prognosis Negative. And Prognosis Negative in Seinfeld is supposed to be Dr. Giggles. And George is very excited. He's like me. He's like a big, dumb little fat kid. And he's like, oh, we're going to go see Prognosis Negative, Jerry, and it's going to be great. Prognosis Negative was in the fake movie, in the fake show, was also terrible. Just so you know, George didn't get laid either. Just like me. Hey, kids! Do you know what time it is? It's time for my favorite part of the show, Unhinged Reviews. Okay. This review was written by Hate Fakes. I don't get that. Hate Fakes. Okay, cool, dude. Having a name Hate Fakes on Amazon. Look, I think my name is just Gerald on Amazon. Like, hello, Gerald. You've got some things in your shopping cart. You've got a fake pussy and you've got some lube. That's what's in my shopping cart. They sell really, really cheap fake pussies on Amazon. I got to get one. It's $12. Where could I go wrong? Oh, yeah, the Unhinged Review. Sorry. Hate Fakes wrote this. He bought the Blu-ray. It's a verified purchase. 1.0 out of 5 stars. Do not buy this corny trash. I want my money back. The ratings are a lie. Do not buy this corny trash. Well, I will say, Hate Fakes, you brought it full circle. That was the title of your review, and you told people not to buy this corny trash. Now, it says here that you bought this movie January 24th of 2019, and you bought the special edition from Shout Factory. Shout out to Shout Factory. That's our company, Shout Factory. Shout out to Shout Factory. Wow, that's redundant, isn't it? Hey, here's a sick plug for Shout Factory, aka Scream Factory. Sponsor this show, because I gotta tell you, I'm gonna need to take out a second mortgage to keep buying Blu-rays from you people. Look, you bought the special edition of this movie. You wanted the slipcase. You wanted to have the behind the scenes with Manny Cotto and Larry Drake and the new director's commentary. You fucking knew what you were getting into. You deserve if you think it sucks, hey look, you're a rube. What can I tell you? This movie came out in 1992. If you didn't know by the year of our Lord 2019 that this was a shit show, well, you deserve everything you got. Because here's the deal. Little fat kid Jerry goes to see the movie. He doesn't know. Roger Ebert hasn't reviewed it. Well, fuck on me. I don't know. I don't know that it sucks because I'm an idiot. I'm there opening day with my best friend, Mr. Popcorn, and my other good friend, Dr. Pepper, who recently had a baby. No, so I'm there, and that movie sucks. If you had all this time, all this research, I'm sure Joe Bob hasn't done this movie, because he's got half a fucking brain. Okay, we got another Unhinged review. From Barbarian, 1.0 out of 5 stars. Wow. I'm seeing a trend here, Producer Pete. Larry Drake looks evil, but can't act. Now, that's bullshit, man. You can This is where I turn on the people who bought this. This is another one from Amazon. And fuck you, you bought this on Amazon. Larry Drake looks evil, but he can't act. First off, look, he ain't got much to work with. The screenplay sucks. And the equivalent of Dr. Giggles is pretty much, you're going to have to get some bed rest. And that's the performance. And I get it, but he looks, I believe it. Listen, Larry Drake looks like a guy who you would find shopping at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night at a grocery store, childless, wifeless, and totally might fucking chop you up. And that is effective. Would I have had all the punchlines? Probably not. I think because Freddy Krueger, in the beginning, he's scary. You watch those first movies and he's very creepy and we keep him in the dark and he starts, like, this is God. And then we start getting more one-liners and it gets corny. This is corny right out of the gate. Had they kept Larry Drake a little more, don't have him talk. Don't give him the corny line. Don't say, put the thermometer in your mouth, not your ass. No, he doesn't say that. But that's what I would say if I was Doc. Hey, can we remake Producer Pete, get somebody on the phone. Let's remake Dr. Giggles. I could be Dr. Giggles. I could. So, especially my good friend Dr. Pepper will write me a recommendation. I could do research with him. Oh yeah, Unhinged Reviews. Sorry, folks. I'm out of control. I'm out of control. I just had my C4 Jolly Rancher watermelon energy drink, and I'm ready to fuck. I'm ready to finish this episode. Barbarian writes, 1 out of 5 stars. Larry Drake looks evil but can't act. How are we supposed to take a gimp from LA Law seriously? That's pretty funny. He called this dude a gimp. Come on, man. You just did Larry Drake dirty. Dude, this review is fucking pretty unhinged. It probably helped to bill your victims and get the payment before killing them. Okay, that's funny. He's the greatest dentist of our time. Isaac Yankem DDS has nothing on Dr. Giggles' Larry Drake. Now, if you didn't get that reference because you're not a pro wrestling nerd like me, Isaac Yankem DDS was the dentist that Kane, before he found the gimmick of Kane as the Undertaker's brother, he was a evil dentist. Still a good gimmick. And nobody likes the dentist. And I'm going to tell you, that stinks of Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon probably went to the dentist. He was like, I hate the fucking dentist. You know what? And that's how he came up with it. But it is what it is. The geniuses in Hollywood probably kicked themselves thinking they hired a prize gem from Darkman to play this leading role. What a piece of shit. Wow, that digressed very quickly. One more. Can we do one more, Producer Pete? We'll do one more. Breeze, this is a verified purchase from Target. 1.0 out of 5 stars. Nope is the title of the review. I like that. I like this motherfucker. And he bought this May 27th, 2021. So again, you bought the Shout Factory Special Edition. You know what you were getting into. Movie sucks so badly. Like, seriously, make a better movie. Yep. That, you know, sometimes out of the mouths of babes or off the internet, you find this and that's it. You know, look, it's not, I can't argue. The movie does kind of suck. I'm sorry. I rewatched Dr. Giggles. After many years of not seeing this film, I revisited it. And I gotta tell you, I was sitting there with my Dr. Pepper and I could barely get through it. It's got ambiance. It's a beautifully shot film. Larry Drake is very imposing. It doesn't come together. The lack of teeth, the lack of gore, the lack of nudity really hurt this movie. And it ends up feeling, even though they spent like $7.5 million, it feels like a made-for-TV movie. You know, this week on NBC, Larry Drake plays the doctor who went too far. Okay, he made a TV movie of the week. Cool, but for $7.5 million, no. I was bored to tears. And again, this movie is 88 minutes, barely. Had it limped into the 92-minute range, it probably would have fallen apart. This is not a recommend. I'm sorry. If you have morbid curiosity and you feel that you need to do this, then definitely make it happen. The pressing, again, Shout Factory, I'm doing the Lord's work here. You guys, you need to get me on the payroll. Shout Factory has done a limited pressing of this movie. And I've told you guys many times, JVC, Universal, Dark Horse, this movie isn't going to be on Blu-ray much longer. So if you really want, get out there or just order it from Shout Factory's website. Get this movie, because if you don't, you're just going to either have to buy a bootleg, buy it digitally, or you're not going to be able to get it anymore in physical media. So if you're a Dr. Giggles fan, hey, look, write me in. Hit me up on social media. Are you a fan of Dr. Giggles? Is Jerry, Jerry's fucking crazy, Dr. Giggles sucked. Oh my God. Am I the bad guy here? I don't know. I revisited it. I watched it almost twice, and I couldn't get into it. I'm sorry, guys. It is not a recommend. I think there's better things that you could spend your time doing. Man, Producer Pete, I am sorry. I don't even know what we could do to save this episode. Wait, I do. I know exactly how we could save this episode of The Offering. We're going to talk all about Monster Force 1994. What? Jerry, did you just do Inception in an Offering episode? I sure did, Johnny. I sure did. Little sidetrack just to cleanse the palate. of Dr. Giggles. Monster Force was created in 1994. It was, again, we couldn't do a whole episode on this. It's not even a movie. It's a cartoon series. If you're familiar with Marv Wolfman, who is a comic book author and artist, he did Tomb of Dracula. He was the Blade creator, Teen Titans. He did Crisis on Infinite Earths. In collaboration with Universal Cartoon Studios, the show was developed to reintroduce Universal monsters to children. The plot centers around a group of college-age students and their professor, Dr. Reed Crawley, to form a squad called the Monster Force, who, through the use of some supernatural skills and technological weaponry, must combat Dracula and his army called the Creatures of the Night. Does this sound a little bit like Van Helsing? A little bit? Because it kind of is, because we're doing that 10 years later. The series aired through broadcast syndication from April to July of 1994. It had terrible viewership. It was canceled after its first season. They made some toys. The toys are cool. There was a comic book tie-in for Monster Force. But I like the idea of these college-age kids who are supposed to, they're kind of like the Mystery Machine. What are they called? Scooby-Doo and the gang? Mystery Incorporated, thank you. And they team up with the monsters, and there's good monsters, and Dracula's the bad monster, and they kind of Marvel comic book the whole thing, and they're a little bit like superheroes, and we're fighting them. Listen, there's only like 6 episodes of this thing. It's been on Peacock for the longest time. You got to dig to the bottom of you got to enter a cheat code into, you got to go up, down, left, right, and you can ABA start, and you can get Monster Force on Peacock. No, it's been on there. It's like 6 episodes. It's cool. It's Marv Wolfman, so the creature designs look great. Everything looks great. The toys were pretty cool, but guess what? Just like Dr. Giggles, just like Van Helsing, just like the Mummy with Tom fucking Cruise, they can't bring back these monsters. Just stop. Just stop already. I feel like fucking Tom Atkins at the end of Halloween 3. He's like, stop, just make it stop. I want this to fucking end. But what I do want is, I do want that dark universe at Epic Universe that's going to be in Universal at Orlando, and we're going to go on all the monster rides, and Pete's going to be like, oh, it's making me sick, and I'm going to say, Pete, we're going on again, and we're getting a big Dracula milkshake, and it's going to be fantastic. Just give me the fucking theme park. Well, folks, that's been The Offering. I'm Jerry Horror. I hope you have a lovely Halloween season. Get into that spooky stuff, baby. Don't watch Dr. Giggles. Maybe you watch something else. There's a bunch of other movies that we've covered. You can find them on iTunes, Apple, Apple, right? Spotify, YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, The Offering, WJH, because I'm too girthy to fit on that mother. I'm at Jerry Horror on just about every damn social media platform known to man. Follow me on TikTok, where they constantly pull down our videos because it's ridiculous, but we fixed that because we've got a hot new theme song, which you probably heard at the beginning of the episode. Isn't that groovy? You know what else is groovy? Go buy a t-shirt from TeePublic. David Graham. Shout out to David Graham and Gaspacho Jones. They got the Miseducation, that podcast. That's good. Go follow them. They're on the Apple and all the other stuff. Sometimes, Pete, I feel like I'm an old man here. I'm plugging all this shit. I don't even know what I'm talking about. What is this stuff? Social media? Go buy a fucking t-shirt. All right? Go to TeePublic. Go buy a mug. Tell everybody how great this show is. Be like, oh my God, we got hats. We got trucker hats. Oh my, you can buy a flag. Did you know you could buy a fucking Jerry Horror flag? The guy next door to you, he's got a Kamala flag. The other guy's got a Trump flag. You got The Offering. And they're like, what the fuck is The Offering? Is he running? I don't know. The way this country's going, I might be running for office because that's where we are, folks. Things are pretty fucking dire in the United States right now. To be perfectly honest with you, this whole fucking election cycle, it's driving me crazy. And I think the only thing that might calm me down is to go see Mr. Popcorn, Dr. Pepper, and have the lovely Jen Feldman sit on my lap. Because that's the only thing that can fix any of this. Folks, this has been The Offering. With me, your host, Jerry Horror. Mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at theofferingwithjerryhorror@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter at theofferingwjh, or hit me up on the Instagram at jerryhorror. You get the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Join us next time for another offering.
Chasing worries like a Maya, drama twists that shake your core. Every episode, we craving more. Mostly horror, always genre.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.